Okay, here we are, our daily fueling up for the journey. So we are going through the New Testament in a year, and we are in Matthew chapter 23. So we're getting to the end of the book of Matthew, and we're looking right now, we started in chapter 21 of the last week of the life and ministry of Jesus on earth. And so now he's in the city of Jerusalem. He's come 3 times with his disciples into the city. He's coming during the Passover feast. This is the biggest holiday for the Jewish people, Passover. And people have come from everywhere. The city is crowded. There's folks everywhere. There's a lot of activity, a lot of money being spent, a lot of religious activity, a lot of families reuniting. And all the religious leaders are there. Now, Rome is there as well. Rome is there in force. They are waiting for a riot. They are hoping it doesn't happen. Every year they're waiting for a riot, wondering what's going to go on. And so the religious leaders are there, and Jesus is there. Jesus begins teaching. And in this particular chapter, he's going to give what's called the 7 woes. The 7 woes to the Pharisees, to the Sadducees, to the religious leaders who have made it difficult for people to serve God. Imagine that. The religious leaders are making it difficult for people to come to God. So let's just jump in and see what Jesus said. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples. So he's teaching his disciples, but the crowds are there, and so the crowds are listening in. And he said this: the teachers of the law and the Pharisees, they sit in Moses' seat. Now, Moses is the one who gave the 10 Commandments. And they are the ones who are now supposedly the police officers over the 10 Commandments, making sure that everybody's following this stuff. So they sit in Moses' seat. So you must be careful to do everything they tell you. But don't do as they do, for they do not practice what they preach. Now, we hear that phrase all over the place, practice what you preach. Well, here's Jesus is the one that sort of coins that phrase. And he says, do what they say, but don't do what they do. They're hypocrites. The word hypocrite means actor. They act like they're holy, they act like they're righteous, but they're really not. Here's what they do. They tie heavy, cumbersome loads, and they put them on people's shoulders. But they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. So they put all these rules, all these regulations, all these difficulties, all these religious stipulations on people, but they're not willing to help. They just want to put some trip on you. And this still happens today. You'll find that many people who claim to be Christians will put all kinds of trips on people, but they're not going to help you at all. They're just going to lay their trips on you. And he said everything they do is for people to see. They wear their phylacteries wide and their tassels in their garments long. They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and they love to be called rabbi. Rabbi means teacher. Well, these things here that they're talking about, they would take the word, there is one God, and they would wear it on their head in a little box, so that you would see it, and you would see that they were holy. Why? They put it on the box near their head because the word of God would be near their head, and they want people to see that. And so they make them wide. They make these big ones. And then they take the tassels on their garments so that everybody can see that they're religious. When they go to the banquets, when they go places, they want to sit up right up in the front. They want to be at the head table. They want everybody to see them. When they go into the marketplaces, they love it when everybody says, "Oh, Rabbi, Rabbi, Rabbi." And Jesus said, but you're not to call him rabbi. You only have one teacher, and you're all brothers. So there's no superiors in this thing. We're all equal. Different people have different roles, but we're all equal. We're all brothers. Don't call anyone on earth father, for you have one Father, and he's in heaven. Now, I don't think this is saying, don't call your dad, or your papa. He's saying, don't call anyone some religious sort of superior to you and see it that way. And he said, nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. You only have one teacher. And the greatest among you will be your servant, for those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. So there you go. And now we get into the woes. There's 7 of them. Verse 11, woe to you, teachers of the law, you Pharisees, you hypocrites. You shut the door to the kingdom. You shut it in people's faces. My page didn't turn properly. And you yourselves don't enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying. So people are trying to get in, but they close the door. All this religious nonsense, just make it simple. Jesus died for people. He wants people to come to him, and they make it difficult. Woe to you, teachers of the law, you Pharisees. You travel all over land and sea to win one convert. And when you have succeeded in making him, you make him twice as much a child of hell as you are. Wow. Can you say that in church? Can you call someone a child of hell in church? Well, Jesus did. He said you go all over the place and you try to convert somebody, and when you do, you make them just wicked. You make them mean. Good and mean. Good and mean. Woe to you, you blind guides. They can't see themselves. They don't see. You say if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he's bound by that. You're blind guides. Which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You say if anyone swears by the altar, it's nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift on the altar, he's bound. You're blind guides. Which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes it sacred? Therefore, anyone who swears by the altar or by anything on it, and anyone who swears by the temple or anyone on it, and anyone who swears by heaven and by the throne of God who sits on it. So you'd have to be Jewish to understand all of that in the first century. But verse 23, woe to you, teachers of the law, and you Pharisees, you hypocrites. You give a tenth. The word tithe means tenth, and that was the practice, that was the giving standard of the people in the Jewish community, a tenth. A lot of people today give a tenth. They take a tenth right off the top and they give it to God. And he said, you give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin. So they would take just the seeds and the spice, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for me, 1 for God, 1, 2, 3, 4. He said, you're exacting in that. You're exacting in that. But you've neglected the more important matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. You see, these are the things that are important, justice and mercy and love and faithfulness, not religious activity. Now, what Jesus says is you should have practiced the latter. What's that? You should have practiced justice, you should have practiced mercy, you should have practiced faithfulness, without neglecting the former. Well, people who are followers of Jesus, people who are disciples, we want to give, and God wants us to give. He wants us to take, the idea of the tithe was you take the first of your earnings and you give it to God. You take the first of your life and you give it to God. And Jesus said you should have done all the other things, justice, mercy, and faithfulness, but not forgetting it. You blind guides, you strain at a gnat, but you swallow a camel. So you're all stuck on the little things, but you forget about the big things. Woe to you, teachers of the law, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you're full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and the dish, and then you'll be clean on the outside also. They didn't want to even eat anything where the dust of the Gentiles from the marketplace would get on their dishes, and they'd wash it off. We don't want the dirt from those people. Well, that's not what makes you unclean. What makes you unclean is what comes from within, not what you eat. 27, woe to you, teachers of the law, you Pharisees! You're like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, outside you appear to everyone as righteous, but on the inside you're full of hypocrisy and wickedness. So they would take their tombs and they would whitewash them. They look so nice and they glisten in the sun. But inside it's just dead man's bones. And he said, that's what you religious leaders are like. You're like dead man's bones. You look good on the outside, but inside there's no life whatsoever. And so he goes on and he talks about some other things that they do. And then he finally says in verse 37, there's 2 more, you can read them yourself. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who sent you, religious leaders. How often I wanted to gather your children together like a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you would not. Jesus said, I wanted to take you, and I wanted to teach you, and I wanted to turn you into the people of God, but you weren't willing. You just want to be religious. You just want to be respected. You just want to be a hypocrite. You just want people to think good of you. He said, for I tell you, you might not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Quite the indictment for the religious leaders. And so let's us learn these things, right? That keeping the matters of justice and mercy and faithfulness in the forefront. So Lord, help us with our lives. Help us to not be hypocrites. Lord, help us to not just do things for religious reasons, but to do things because we love you, and because we love you, we love people. Help us, Lord. Help us. So may the Lord bless you, keep you, make his face shine upon you, give you peace. You are loved by God. Hey, love you guys.